The Nintendo Switch Lite is my favorite handheld from the company. It's more portable than the other models, features arguably better controls, and it can punch well above its weight when modded and overclocked. The problem is that the Switch Lite comes with a screen that isn't great for travel, and it isn't even that great for home use compared to the vastly superior Switch OLED. The screen isn't bright, and the otherwise amazing color calibration is outweighed by the fact that the screen has abysmal contrast. But when Nintendo decided to release a new Switch Lite based on my favorite game series as a child, I knew there was only one thing to do: cross the border, buy one in person, and mod it to be the best current gen Switch model possible. To do that, we're going to upgrade the screen to an OLED panel, and the main reason why this thing exists is because I've had a thought in the back of my head for years. Why are there no modern screen upgrades for some of the best handhelds in history? In 2024, we have OLED screens for the Game Boy Color, but where are my screen upgrades for the Nintendo DS, PlayStation Portable, original Switch and Switch Lite, or even the 3DS? I got tired of waiting, so I co-founded a company earlier this year to create a product line for as many of those as possible, and the first one that we decided to tackle was the Switch Lite. More on that in just a bit. Here is my Hyrule Edition Switch Lite that I have yet to unbox, which was very difficult given how hyped I was to buy this. This isn't available to buy where I live, so I had to contact a store in Hong Kong that thankfully had one in stock. They had one on display when I got there, and it looked even better than I thought it would. I also bought a ton of games while I was there, including the new Zelda game that I am dying to beat. I haven't looked at any spoilers for this game, and I intend to beat the entire game on the Switch Lite that we mod in this video. Anyways, let's do a quick unboxing. This is the Hong Kong version of this model. The regular Switch is sold in China, but it's region locked. Most people there will buy Hong Kong or Japanese models so they can play imported titles, because outside of the 10-cent version, Switch games are not region locked. Even if you buy Chinese versions of a game, there's a good chance that it will support English by default or with an OTA update. Not being region locked is probably the best part of this platform. But as for this, I'm not expecting there to be anything new with this packaging. This isn't intended to be a collector's item, but I do intend to hold on to this packaging and treat it like it is. But here it is. Wow, this thing looks even better in person than it does online. I love the paint job on this and the small Triforce on the right side. The back has a huge Triforce emblem in the center in place of the Switch logo that also looks awesome. They have this metallic paint on a Pokemon Switch Lite model, but I think it looks way better here. One thing that I'm kind of surprised to see is how different the bezel is from the shell. I've been color matching all of the Switch Lites for the last few weeks, and I found that it is super difficult to match painted glass with painted plastic. This one isn't as close as some of their other colors are. And I don't know how clear this is going to be after compression, but you can see there's a sizable difference between both on this pink unit. The bezel made for the SUPER5 OLED also isn't perfect, but I think it's closer to the shell color than the original. The original is darker and more dull. Now we just need to get this thing set up so we can start our new game. At this point, the only thing left for us to do now is to actually mod this with an OLED screen, but before we can do that, we need to do a deep dive on the screen itself. It took a long time for this to get to market, but this is the current version of the SUPER5 OLED upgrade. There are a few versions of this with different features like glass touch panels or HDMI output. The version of the mod that I have is the non-touch version with an OCA glass cover. This one here isn't compatible with the stock plastic touchscreen on our Hyrule Edition Switch Lite, and the main reason why is the panel is thinner than the normal IPS screen. For this to be compatible with a plastic touchscreen, you would need an adapter frame so that way it could have one-to-one dimensions and sit inside the Switch Lite in the same space that the IPS screen occupies. That version of this upgrade isn't ready yet, so we are limited to the non-touch golden bezel or a black and white touchscreen bezel. I have a SUPER5 OLED touchscreen sample, but I don't have one that looks decent with this shell color. The golden non-touch version is still being made, so our next best option for this upgrade is a black non-touch panel. I'll be upgrading this with an HDMI touchscreen version later next month. Before we can upgrade the Hyrule Edition Switch Lite, let's talk about the screen itself and some of the benefits that it has over the normal Switch Lite screen. In front of me, I have a stock Palkia and Dialga Switch Lite, as well as a SUPER5 OLED Switch Lite that I shell swapped to the same shell. When I originally teased this screen at the beginning of the year, the main benefit that it had over the stock screen was better contrast, wider color gamut, and slightly better brightness. The current version is much better. When it comes to brightness, the current screen comes in at 600 nits. To put that into perspective, the stock Switch Lite can only get up to 400 nits, and my transparent blue Switch Lite with an aftermarket OCA plastic touch panel comes in much lower at 268 nits. A stock OLED Switch and a stock V1 or V2 come in much lower than the stock Lite with 335 nits or 341 nits respectively. Those aren't great numbers, and while the SUPER5 OLED isn't going to hold up in direct sunlight, It does a way better job than the original. Minimum brightness also isn't that bad. It's about the same as the Switch OLED. The worst part about the stock Switch Lite screen is how it holds up in darker games or in games that have a lot of contrast. IPS screens aren't known for having good contrast ratios, but the Switch Lite is even worse than you would normally find with a contrast ratio of 900:1. Having an OLED screen gives us pure blacks, and the SUPER5 OLED screen has an even higher contrast ratio than the OLED Switch. Metroid for the Nintendo Switch Online is a great title to showcase because the game uses a pure black background, and it looks amazing when you play it on an OLED panel. If you play this in the dark, you will have perfect character isolation, and there are a lot of older games that are like this. Even simple things like Minecraft are going to look way better than the stock screen when you're doing some caving. With an OLED panel, we also have a wider color gamut. The Switch Lite caps out at 100% sRGB, and even though that is low compared to the Switch OLED, the panel itself is calibrated very well. The Switch Lite and the original Switch have amazing color calibration. It's just that the colors look kind of dull with how bad the contrast is. On the SUPER5 OLED, we are up to 151% sRGB or 100% of the P3 color space. When it comes to color calibration, in the default mode, it's pretty similar to the Switch OLED, but the Switch OLED only has 134% sRGB. I prefer the vivid profile on the Switch OLED for almost every situation when I'm playing in handheld mode, and I think the added range of this screen looks amazing, especially in games that have a ton of vibrant colors. The good thing about this is you always have the option of capping your colors down to 100% sRGB if you want a less vibrant image. With that mode, you get the same color range as a stock Switch Lite with a way better picture. That leaves us with power consumption, and the general thoughts on this are that OLED panels are more efficient than non-OLED panels, and that's really only true in some situations. It is possible for this screen to always be more efficient than the stock screen, but that would mean that we would need to cap our brightness. Here's a simple rule of thumb for this situation. When both screens are set to the same brightness, there isn't a big difference between them when it comes to overall power consumption. The OLED screen can get up to 50% brighter than stock, and it starts to use more power than stock in that range. I debated on capping the screen to 400 nits when this was in development, but the added brightness was too good to pass up. To have some real-world data, I went ahead and ran Tears of the Kingdom as a stress test on the same Switch Lite, and we can also compare that with the earlier measurements that I got from a bench power supply. So this will use more power at max brightness, but I think the trade-off is worth it. Now that we've covered what the SUPER5 OLED is and what it does, it's time to mod our Hyrule Switch Lite, and this is going to take a while because we have a lot to do. If we were to only do the screen upgrade, we would be done in less than 10 minutes, but I have a lot that I want to do to make this the ultimate Switch Lite possible. The screen part of this mod is the SUPER5 OLED screen, but we will also upgrade to a 5000 mAh battery to get significantly better battery life, as well as a set of Hall effect analog sticks suitably made for Zelda. This isn't intended to be a tutorial, but I will show almost everything that goes into doing these three mods. I have a full tutorial on my second channel for just the screen itself. Our goal for this point is to do a full teardown because we need to get to both joysticks, and we also need to swap out the mid-frame. To make this easier, I'm going to use the tray that comes with the screen to help organize all of my screws. We're going to start by removing the 3 screws on the heatsink, the 4 screws on the audio jack, and the 3 screws on the cartridge slot for a total of 10 that are all the same size. After that, we need to use a pry tool to gently separate the adhesive material on the top of the fan that connects it to the heat pipe. Then we can pull off the heat pipe and set it to the side, unlatch the cartridge reader, and put that to the side as well. We can also disconnect the screen and the touch panel at this point. Be careful when you're doing this, especially with the screen connector. After that, we have 5 green tinted screws to remove, including 2 from the ZR button. Disconnect the right analog ribbon cable, and then move on to the last 3 screws holding the motherboard in place. The last thing to do is to disconnect the fan and disconnect the 2 Wi-Fi cables. Then we can pull the PCB up and put it to the side. The interesting thing about this shell is that they've injected this with plastic material that isn't really close to the color that they painted at all. So when the paint wears off or scratches off, you will easily notice this plastic color. Moving on, remove 2 screws from ZL and then disconnect the bottom ribbon cable so we can access all of the screws. There are 2 silver screws that connect to the mid-frame and 3 green tinted screws, including one that is under the speaker. So remove the 3 green tinted ones, the 2 silver ones, and then remove the speaker. After you disconnect the left analog, the only thing left to do is to disconnect the backlight ribbon cable. Now I need to move to the 4 remaining screws to free the middle frame from the front shell. Here's something interesting that I wasn't expecting to see. All of my other Switch Lites have a reflective back panel. This screen did seem to be a tad brighter than the other one, but the revision seems to be the same. The model number is only slightly different between the two of them. Now it's time to remove the screen itself from the front shell, and there are only two ways to do this, but I'm going to go with the front method since it's easier. We need to apply some slight heat to the front bezel, making sure not to melt the plastic, and then we need to use a suction cup to gently pry up until we can get a gap big enough for our pick. I got a good opening on the top right corner, and that was enough for me to be able to remove the adhesive strip around the entire bezel. I'm going to set this off to the side because I need to use this for color matching in the future. The screen left behind the entire adhesive strip, so I need to go ahead and remove that so we don't double up on adhesive later on. Everything else from here on is pretty easy. We're going to swap in our Hall joysticks, move the fan into the second magnesium frame, and then screw the frame into our front shell. Then we basically reverse everything that we just did. This part is not difficult, it's just time consuming. You will notice that I have not installed the new screen yet, and if this was an IPS screen, you would need to install it before adding the left controller board, but we can install it all the way at the very end of this install if we want. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to screw the left controller board in, transfer over the bottom ribbon cable, connect it, and then finish off with the ZL button. Now we need to put the motherboard back in and screw in the 3 silver retaining screws that we removed earlier. Connect the 2 Wi-Fi cables, the fan, and then finish off with the left screws. At this point, we need to install the SUPER5 OLED screen, and this is very easy to do. We need to remove the adhesive cover, and then we need to slide this tiny ribbon cable through the cutout under the battery. I'm going to seat the screen in on one side so I can manually push the screen connector through the mid-frame hole. Then I need to push down around the bezel to secure the frame to the front shell. We could now test if everything works before going forward. And I want to point out there's really only one point of failure for this entire mod, and it's the screen connector. The display connector on this is not great. If you ruin the display connector, you will need to use a heat gun and a replacement part to fix it. So slide the ribbon cable into place, making sure that it's even on all sides, and then gently close the latch by pressing down in the middle. After that, we need to add back the cartridge reader and the 7 screws. At this point, I could repaste with better thermal paste if I wanted, but I plan to come in here in about a month or so to do an HDMI mod, so there's no point in doing that just yet. Finally, we need to connect our display to the battery FPC. Connect the right 4-pin connector to the controller board, remove the adhesive cover, connect the battery to the FPC, connect the power cable to the motherboard, and then connect the FPC to the motherboard. I want to point out that the final version of this FPC won't stretch like this. The measurements on this version aren't correct. This is just the final rush version that was made before the holiday. The retail version of this will route the cable over to the right a bit higher than this, and it will have much better alignment than this one does. But the only thing left for us to do is connect our final cable, test that it works, and then transfer over some stock thermal paste. Again, I'm going to mod this in less than a month with MX4, so there's no point in making this perfect. Then we're pretty much done after we screw in the back shell. And here it is. The OLED Hyrule Edition Switch Lite with a 5000 mAh battery and Hall effect joysticks. This thing is amazing. Before wrapping up this video with my overall thoughts on this entire upgrade, let's do a quick performance showcase of some games running on this upgraded system. It's been about 2 days since I filmed that build portion of this video, and I have been having a blast. Most of my time with the SUPER5 OLED prior to this video has been in testing, debugging, or calibrating the display. This is the first time in the entire year that I've just been able to enjoy this for what it is as an end user. When I play games on this, I feel like I'm playing on my OLED Switch if my OLED Switch was brighter and smaller. And that's kind of what I always wanted Nintendo to make. A small Switch that is great for travel, but also has a great screen. Before the OLED Switch release, the Switch Lite was fine for that. But ever since I bought my OLED Switch, I only ever use my Switch Lite when I'm not at home. And that's largely because I don't want to risk ruining my OLED Switch. But every time I play on my Switch Lite, I'm reminded by how much worse things look than my OLED. Things even look worse than they do on my standard Switch. I don't feel that way now. I now have a small device that is great for travel with a great screen. And with the 5000 mAh battery upgrade that we did in this video, I can get much better battery life, making it even better for travel. There are 2 other versions of this mod that we have not looked at yet. There's a touchscreen version that adds a glass touch panel to this upgrade, and there's also an HDMI mod that adds video out capability to the Switch Lite. Even though I already have other Switch consoles that have native video out support, I am super excited for the HDMI mod. That's going to be the final mod that I install in this Hyrule Edition Switch Lite to make it complete. As for the new Zelda game, I can't recommend it enough. There are some slowdowns here and there, but I think Nintendo did an awesome job. Anyway, that's going to wrap up things for this video on the OLED screen for the Switch Lite. It's a simple upgrade that greatly improves the gaming experience of my favorite Switch model. And to Nintendo, please do not strike this video. I like your games and I'm more than happy to pay for them to play them on official hardware, but I just want them to look better. That's why this mod exists. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at my big video on the Switch Lite in 2024. With this upgrade, it is easily Nintendo's best handheld. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.